Welcome to the newest episode, a midweek edition of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In today's video, we're going to talk about several things from Michigan that happened after the race, and I didn't get a chance to talk about them in Monday's recap, including a pair of comments, one from Kyle Busch, who called out a familiar foe, and another from a frustrated Ryan Blaney who wasn't happy with his buddy, Chase Elliott. Plus, I have a story that came out today regarding this weekend's Daytona broadcast that I know fans will love. And finally, we'll wrap up with this week's By the Numbers segment, and we have several interesting categories to break down. However, before we get to that, I want to first point out a new addition to the studio. As you can see, I have a new autographed Kyle Busch helmet that I bought for myself at Pristine Marketplace. And before I get any comments about, oh, I always knew you were a Kyle Busch fan, I'd A, recommend you go back and check out my previous videos and what I've had to say about the RCR driver. And B, Kyle knows I'm not his fan, and that's why he blocked me on X a couple of years ago. As I've said when asked before, I don't have a favorite Cup driver. I love the sport, but don't favor any driver in particular because it's my job to cover them without bias. The main reason I got this helmet is honestly, I'm a fan of the sponsor. There you go. I do know someone who is about to be a fan of Pristine Marketplace, and that's Reddick 1. Why? Because they are the latest winner of our Christmas in August celebration for Pristine Marketplace and have won this cool 2001 autographed diecast from Kevin Harvick. How'd they win? They followed my instructions a few videos back, headed over to Pristine Marketplace, found a couple of items they wanted for their Christmas and August wish list, and let me know in the comments. And they were randomly selected in a drawing. If you didn't see the video and comment back then, there's still a chance to win by saving $10 off your first purchase. Check out the link in the description. Go check out Pristine Marketplace for all your NASCAR and sports memorabilia needs. They have a ton of cool items, including diecast, helmets, and even cool art of your favorite driver. All right, now, let's move on to our first story of the day, and it comes from the driver who wears this helmet. If you saw Monday's video, I talked about how Busch offered some interesting comments about Joey Logano and what happened the week before at Richmond. Here's a refresher.
Certainly there's the right way to win races and there's the wrong way to win races. There's a lot of guys that have done some desperate things to get wins, even when they're not desperate, you know. The one that had it happen to him is probably the one that's done it the most, that doesn't need to do it. So, you know, I guess his comments, he can be calling himself that.
Rowdy made those comments on Saturday. On Monday, after the completion of the rain-delayed race, the two-time Cup Series champion called out a second driver, and unsurprisingly, it was another familiar foe. This time, it was Brad Keselowski. Why? Busch was responding to a post by NASCAR's X account that showed the final restart, where the number 6 lined up in the second row on the outside, and the RCR driver in the row right behind him, and included the moment when the RFK Racing driver co-owner unexpectedly checked up going into turn 1. Which caused a chain reaction as the number 8 and others stacked up behind. NASCAR Overtime in Michigan, the NASCAR account posted, "This is how it went down," to which Busch bluntly replied, "What the blank was the 6 doing?" Busch obviously hadn't had the opportunity to see it, but Keselowski explained what happened in his post-race interview.
Yeah, we just had a couple issues today with engine shutting off, so it was frustrating, but just part of our day.
All I have to say is Kyle Busch has come back from the Olympic break and his European vacation refreshed. That includes on the track, where he scored a 12th at Richmond and 4th at Michigan, his first top 5 in 13 races, and off the track, taking swipes at a couple of his favorite drivers. As I said a few minutes ago, I don't have a favorite when it comes to drivers. But as a journalist, I do appreciate that Kyle is often unvarnished in his thoughts and regularly shares them. That's good for the sport. Moving on from one of our active two-time champions to a story about a pair of champions, including the reigning one, Ryan Blaney. I'm not sure if you saw it, but on that final trip around the 2-mile circuit at Michigan, Blaney and his good buddy, Chase Elliott, were racing each other when the Hendrick Motorsports driver who was underneath him got loose. and slid up into the side of the number 12 car. It was basically just a racing deal. That didn't matter to Blaney, who was understandably upset about it after the race, according to Jeff Gluck. I asked Ryan Blaney what happened on the last lap, Gluck posted on X. Ask the 9, Blaney replied. Gluck said Chase Elliott made a quick exit from pit road and he didn't get a chance to ask his question. Nothing will come of it because if you saw my interview with Chase Elliott back in June from New Hampshire, which I encourage you to go watch, these two are tight. They've traveled the world together. But I do find it really intriguing how they have to find a balance between their friendship and being competitors. It's a delicate balance, to say the least. Speaking of Elliott interviews and Gluck, I encourage everyone to go read this week's 12 questions in The Athletic. They covered a variety of topics, but two things in particular stuck out to me. First, I thought Elliott's response to the question of which driver would you least like to be stuck with on an elevator was funny. Chase said if you're put in that situation, you'd figure something out, but then talked about Denny Hamlin. Quote, but honestly, right now, I don't super dislike anyone in here today. Subject to change tomorrow, right? He laughed. I mean, Denny, we've had our differences, but I feel like we could sit down and have a pretty great conversation and probably walk out of there in a great place. So I just don't really have anybody bad to pick right now, end quote. And then in his final question, which Denny Hamlin provided the week before, Gluck asked Elliott, if you are president of NASCAR and you get to change one major thing, what would it be? He said it would be the schedule and said when looking at other sports, less is more. He used college football as an example. Quote, when I look at our schedule, we could really take some of that and put it in our corner as an extremely positive thing for a lot of reasons. One, you're giving the people who really make the show go on, which are the teams, a chance to have a life at home, which is going to make them a happier person when they come to the racetrack. It's going to make the fans want us to be back on the track with more excitement and more joy. And if you did it right, you could eliminate having to compete against football, because that's just not one you're ever going to win. I'm not saying run less races either. I'm just saying from a calendar year standpoint, we have a good starting point, and I would do something to end a little sooner just so you're not competing against football. End quote. To be honest, I was somewhat confused by his answer because if you want to run the same number of races but end sooner, I think the only way to achieve that is running multiple races in a week, like a midweek race. Maybe I'm missing something, but honestly, if that's the case, I'd love that, and I think a lot of fans would too. Let me know what you think about that in the comments section. And finally, our last story is what I consider fantastic news that was announced today by NBC. And that's the network is going to show every green flag lap at Daytona this coming weekend, as well as at Atlanta and Talladega. This means side-by-side commercials, but we will get to see everything as it happens in real time. Hallelujah! Anyone who has followed my channel or read my writing over the last couple of years knows I have been super critical of the volume of commercials. In fact, at my previous job and even for a time at Heavy, I've written stories that have featured commercial trackers that show in a race how many commercials there are, how long they take, and how many green flag laps fans missed. That includes numerous times when the television viewing audience at home has missed something important, like a caution because we were in a commercial break. With NBC's NASCAR Nonstop, that won't be an issue for these 3 races. That is fantastic news, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I have to give a huge shout out to NBC for doing this. And finally, our last part of this episode is a return of our By the Numbers segment. Let's start with the team race lines, or how drivers and teams perform during the course of the race at Michigan. There are a couple in particular that I want to highlight, starting with Hendrick Motorsports. As you can see, William Byron, Kyle Larson, and Chase Elliott all started inside the top 10. All 4 cars, including Alex Bowman, were running inside the top 15 at the conclusion of stages 1 and 2, and then look what happens in that final stage. Larson and Bowman were involved in accidents and finished in the back of the field. Now, let's take a look at the race-winning team at 23XI Racing, and as you can see, both started inside the top 5, but it was Bubba Wallace that appeared to be the car in the best position to have a run at the victory through the first 2 stages. But it's that final stage, the one that matters most, and Tyler Reddick showed why he's been one of the best drivers all year, and he rebounded in that last stage for his second trip to victory lane. And a couple of other race lines I think are worth mentioning is Spire Motorsports, and you can see how both Zane Smith and Carson Hocevar were near the back of the field at the end of stage 1, but then steadily moved their way forward in those final stages, both securing top 10 finishes. We all saw what happened to Corey LaJoie. And take a look at the Richard Childress Racing race line. Austin Dillon had an up and down day, but Kyle Busch steadily moved his way to the front. That 2-tire stop at the end helping him, and he held on for a top 5 finish. Now, let's take a look at the 2024 driver dashboard, and I want to highlight a few drivers. First, let's start with Kyle Larson. His results this year are absolutely wild. Look at that. He has 4 wins and 5 finishes of 32nd or worse, 4 of them DNFs. He's been consistently inconsistent. And now let's look at his teammate, William Byron. He has had a similar issue with up and down runs, 3 victories but 4 finishes of 30th or worse. Another one I think worth mentioning is Joey Logano. He's locked into the playoffs with his win at Nashville, but when you look at the 2-time champ's season, it's not been great, and it's actually been similar to both Larson and Byron as far as inconsistency. Through the first 24 races, he's got as many top 5s as he does DNFs at 4. Sticking with our theme of consistently inconsistent and moving over to Joe Gibbs Racing, and our example is Christopher Bell. The number 20 pilot has 3 wins, but he's also the leader in all of the Cup Series in one ugly category, and that's DNFs. Bell has 6, his latest a 35th at Michigan. And finally, let's move over to one of my favorite things to talk about in our By the Numbers segment, and that's average finishing position over the last 5 races. After Tyler Reddick won at Michigan, everyone was talking about how solid he's been this year. How solid exactly? He has a 10.5 average finishing position for the season, and that's tops, moving him just ahead of Chase Elliott, who is at 10.6. But take a look at his last 5 races and the ridiculous numbers he's put up. 2.5. He's been on a major heater with 4 finishes inside the top 5 and a lone finish outside of it, a 6th at Pocono. No one else is even close. Ryan Blaney comes in second, a full 6 positions behind at 8.6 with 3 top 10s, and it's followed by Daniel Suarez, who has definitely stepped up his game as of late with 3 top 10s himself. Bubba Wallace had some misfortune at Michigan, but appeared to have a race-winning car, and he's had speed in the last 5 as his numbers indicate, with a pair of top 5s and an average finishing position of 11.6. Chase Elliott, who has been battling with Reddick for much of the season, since I started putting out these last 5 races, comes in at 5th with an average finishing position of 12.8. Rounding out the top 10 are Elliott's teammate William Byron at 6th, Brad Keselowski, Carson Hocevar, Austin Dillon, and Denny Hamlin. And the last one I want to talk about is Kyle Busch. In the last 5 before the Olympic break, Rowdy was near the bottom. He's made a big move up with his last 2 races and is 14th with an average finishing position of 16.4. Maybe that's why he's feeling so feisty and living up to his nickname, taking jabs at Logano and Keselowski. All right, guys, that's a wrap on this episode. We covered a lot, and I want to get your thoughts on all of it. First, tell me what you think about Busch's comments on Keselowski. Do you feel like Rowdy is coming back to life? And what did you think about Elliott's comments on the schedule and compressing it? What is your solution for that scenario? And I know what you think about it, but I definitely want to see what you have to say about it in the comments on NBC's announcement that we'll be able to watch all the green flag laps coming up this weekend at Daytona and then again at Atlanta and Talladega. And finally, in our By the Numbers segment, what statistics got your attention? What did I miss? And do you have any drivers in particular you think I should focus on in next week's segment? Again, I just want to congratulate Ryblick 1 for being the latest winner of our Christmas and August celebration for Pristine Marketplace. He's the winner of this 2001 autographed diecast from Kevin Harvick. Check out the link in the description so you can go save $10 off your first purchase at Pristine Marketplace. Thanks as always for supporting the channel, and a little shout out to those of you who told me that you really like the calming effect of my lava lamp. I really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.